Great. Welcome, everyone. It's good. Oh, okay, let me just start this again, letting a few more people in. It's great to have you all here tonight. I'm very excited about this discussion. It's always interesting we are having so many different perspectives on these virtues of resistance calls or talks. It's really interesting to see people who are trying to resist from different points, some from inside, some from outside. And I think this will be a really interesting discussion tonight. So, Amanda, without any further chat on my part, I turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Welcome back to those of you who are staying with us. Congratulations. This is an intense course. Each time it is heavy, and especially today with Gerstein's report and even his own biography is fraught, is itself quite heavy. So, if anyone is new this time, I'll just mention that usually I begin with about 15 minutes of an overview of the person or the group that we're looking at and their story, and then we will record that portion and distribute that, and then we'll have a conversation that's off the record where you're free to discuss both the audio recording that we distributed from the U.S. Holocaust Museum discussing Kurt Gerstein for about 20 minutes, and then also his own report that he made after the war documenting what he saw. And so, yeah, let's dive in. I'm going to do a quick biographical sketch because he has quite an intricate history. There's really a lot to it. So this is just a quick sketch, but you'll recognize some of the places that we've covered throughout the course and a lot of the themes recurring in his own biography. So Kurt Gerstein is born in 1905 in Münster, so where Blessed Clemens von Galen comes from. And throughout his life, he has these dramatic alternations between involvement in the Nazi Party and also involvement in church and a lot of religious interest and curiosity. So he joins the Nazis, really jumping ahead in his biography, in 1933, but he participated in a lot of Christian resistance, anti-Nazi kind of Christian resistance, even upon joining the Nazi Party. Well, that led to his expulsion from it, but then he rejoined it because there were tensions eventually between his career, pretty much all state-owned enterprises. He couldn't really do his mechanical engineering work, and if he was outside of the state's purview, he had some family expectations. He was being pulled in a lot of different directions, and he rejoined the Nazi Party in 39. Eventually, after that expulsion for activities against the party and the state, we learned that police also searched his home and they found these leaflets and these kind of letters. And so he was involved in some of the similar activities that we learned about in other resistance circles. He was also described as a kind of black sheep in his family and just someone who could not really be expected to follow the rules in school or to follow the orders in the military. He was trying to kind of chart his own course. And so he wanted to work again, but he wanted to maintain his kind of Christian interests. And then there's a notable turning point in his consternation over his involvement and over the trajectory of his country when he finds out that his sister-in-law, who had schizophrenia, his sister-in-law was sent to the psychiatric hospital in Hadamar, one of the Nazi euthanasia memorial sites among those that I actually visited. And in 1941, the family received the funeral urn of this sister-in-law who had been euthanized as part of Action T4 at Hadamar because of her schizophrenia. This really riled him and motivated him to get curious about what the Nazis were up to. He applied to join the SS and he had to get references. He was not necessarily the first pick, but he wanted to join a more elite unit and eventually was tasked with the being in the hygiene unit, as it was called in Berlin. And this would lead him to being tasked with the distribution of Zyklon B, a poison gas used in the gas chambers at Auschwitz and other killing sites. For those of you who have been to Auschwitz, if you remember, or Majdanek, or these other sites, if you remember seeing blue stains on the walls, that's from the Zyklon B. And so he was asked to bring this poison gas, and the first thing he did upon bringing the first quantity of it was that he first brought it along as he was asked to do, but then he was shown the concentration camps. He was shown the gas chambers, and he was quite horrified by what he saw. As we have the account in the reports, he was really struck by the dehumanization, by the people all being naked, by the way that they were humiliated, by the way that Jews were made mockery of in very sinister ways, by the way that the killing was happening right before his eyes, and he could not claim to not know. And so the first thing he did in this instance was he lied about the Zyklon B being unable to work or be effective. He basically said, it's defective, this batch, and he went away and dispensed of it in a forest or something. And so he didn't distribute it as he had been asked to do. And yeah, he had started with wanting this kind of window into Action T4, but he ends up getting introduced and initiated to the broader network of concentration camps like Belzec and Treblinka, one of the most horrible death camps, and of course Auschwitz too. So after facing this horrible experience and realizing what he's seen, he pretty soon after, by his account, and again, these are his accounts, and we'll come to the way they were regarded at the time, and maybe a little bit how they're regarded now. But he says that right on the way back to Berlin, he comes across these Swedish officials and wants to share the details with them. He goes on to find means of telling what he had seen, of exposing the truth, of attempting to speak out to the Vatican, and he gets dismissed. He shares the word with the Dutch resistance, even while he's in the SS. He's conveying this. He tried whatever he could to convey it and was dismissed and was getting very discouraged that no one was taking meaningful action. I don't know if it wasn't that they maybe didn't believe him, or they didn't know what maybe lay within their power. So then what we hear a little bit on that U.S. Holocaust Museum podcast is his efforts to sabotage the distribution of Zyklon B wasn't that significant because there were so many massive quantities of this poison gas that it could kill 3 million people. And that still made its way there. And as the speaker in the podcast puts it, even if they hadn't used the gas, they would have found another means, like they often did by shooting the concentration camp um, prisoners and victims. So it's an interesting question. Does sabotaging the Zyklon B distribution in Gerstein's role as the hygiene unit SS guy, does that matter? Does that count? What significance does it hold? Was that a form of resistance that he mounted? Was it significant? Was it interesting for us to kind of contemplate? So we'll come back to that together. After all of this, after the war, he finds a French soldier and explains everything of his involvement, and he's expecting to be treated as a witness. He's writing his testimony. He's trying to explain every step of the process, and he's just seen as a perpetrator, and that's pretty much it. He's put in prison. He's completely implicated in the guilt, and while he is in prison, he hangs himself in 1945 because he, on the one hand, as also the U.S. Holocaust Museum put it, being cast a war criminal combined with the horrors that he had saw really led him to despair. He had wanted to be a witness, but he became strictly a suspect, and yeah, so that was pretty tough and pretty complicated at the time as well, tracing the series of events. Interestingly, so yeah, he died by suicide in 1945. At least that's the mainstream story. I guess there are a few other theories, but that seems to be to kind of check out. And then in 1950, a denazification trial found him guilty for helping to distribute the Zyklon B. And when he was found guilty, I mean, posthumously, 5 years later, in these denazifying trials, his widow was also denied a pension by the state. But then, 15 years later, in 1965, Gerstein was kind of exonerated posthumously, and his wife obtained a posthumous pardon for him, and he has become regarded quite differently. Holocaust historian Christopher Browning has said that there are certainly some factual errors with his numbers, and not all of the details of his testimony are flawless, but nevertheless, it is a tremendous account, and it did contribute to the evidence in the Nuremberg trials, and that he did do a service, and that he did seem, by the accounts of historians today, to have actually been a Nazi resistor from within. Now, perhaps it is a slight exaggeration in 1945 that on writing his report, he goes so far as to say, how gladly would I have gone to death with them upon seeing those being marched into the gas chambers. He says, then they would have found a uniformed SS officer in the chambers. And I don't think that ever happened. I would be interested to hear if I'm wrong, and there was ever a time, but I don't think that ever happened. But it's interesting that even in 45, he's imagining the picture of a Nazi uniform found within any aspect of the concentration camp network that was leading people to their deaths. So, yeah, a very somber story, and I think it will give us lots to discuss in terms of the methods of his resistance, uh, the oscillating between allegiances that seems to be a feature of his personality and of his life, but also of the complexity of the historical situation in which he lived, the historical memory around him, the lack of recognition of his testimony by those who would seem to have been the most welcoming of it. For example, the Vatican or the Dutch resistance, the fact that they did not really receive what he had to share, how disheartening that was, the misunderstanding, the despair. There's so much here to unpack, and so with that, we're going to open it up for some discussion on both. Yeah, you can discuss the podcast, you can discuss this biographical sketch of his history, any of the ethical questions at play, and of course, Gerstein's own report.
Great, thank you. That was really, it's such an amazing story. I'm going to open up the hands right away. So if you want to put your hand up, I can pull you down. Or if you just start talking and I can figure out who you are, then I'll bring you down as well, so that we can all, yeah, hear what you have to say.